Purva. He tells me, Alpesh, you are a consulting kind of a guy, whatever that meant. He said, go ahead, you will enjoy consulting.
You have done this for 28 years.
Yeah.
Were there any pivotal moments that really shaped you to become the CEO of BCG India, now lead the BCG Asia Pacific CEO Advisory as well?
My first mentor, when I really started, told me to dream big. He said, don't sell yourself short.
Do we have running answer on the future of consulting, given that there is now critical reasoning also coming our way from ChatGPT and other open AI platforms? Alpesh, there is no hush-hush. Everyone knows about the McKinsey BCG rivalry. And at least when I was serving BCG as an organization, and I say that I bleed green, I think BCG was doing better than McKinsey in the office as per the statistics I knew. At a learning level from the CEO Diary podcast, are there any fundamental learnings that maybe an entrepreneur can take from this entire shifting of competitor scenario? You were born in a village which is near Ahmedabad. You went to IIM Ahmedabad. Can we understand that journey? What was going in your mind? Did growing up in near Ahmedabad motivated you कि यार यहीं जाना है and I want to study here?
Nothing like that. I don't have a cool story like that. In fact, the exact opposite.
Are there any quote unquote career advice to an 18 or a 19-year-old who really fought big in life, got into that IIT and still is finding hard to get himself or herself a job?
Big fan, while I'm not a religious person, I'm a big fan in Krishna's Karm Kiye Jao.
Hi, and welcome to yet another episode of the CEO Diary on the Shatakshi Show. In this episode of the CEO Diary, I am going to be talking to Alpesh Shah. Alpesh Shah has led the India BCG practice as a CEO, and now currently he's serving as a managing director and senior partner with BCG and is also leading the Asia Pacific CEO Advisory as well. In this episode of the CEO Diary, we are going to be talking to Alpesh on a large and multidimensional topics such as why did he decide to have a career in consulting, how does he go about learning and gaining insightful information in such rapid AI times, what can be the future of consulting, and most importantly, his views on work and life aspect, maintaining both of them, and what will be his advice to young professionals, especially from IIT, even beyond IIT, who might be juggling and struggling to get a job in such changing and tough economic scenarios. If you like this episode of the Shatakshi Show on CEO Diary, feel free to hit on the subscribe and the like button so that we get motivated to bring a lot of senior leaders from the industry, from the world of consulting, and of course outside as well for all of you. I really hope that you enjoy this episode of the Shatakshi Show.
Welcome, Alpesh, to the CEO Diary podcast. Very excited to have you after my journey with BCG and after having you as a masterclass speaker with Global Governance Initiative. The world might know you as the former BCG India CEO, and now you're leading the CEO advisory practice across Asia Pacific, but would absolutely love if you would want to introduce yourself to the world in your own words, and then we'll take it forward from there.
Shatakshi, thank you very much for having me here. I guess let me introduce myself the way I usually do with a lot of my clients. There's a very famous saying, I think Confucius or Socrates or somebody said this, which said that those who cannot do teach. So I have expanded that to say those who cannot do teach, those who cannot teach consult. So my name is Alpesh. I'm a career consultant. Have done this now for, I guess I've lost count, but 28 plus years. And this is the only profession I sort of know. Besides what I've done in consulting, on the personal front, I have two kids who don't like to be called kids now. My son is 18, my daughter is 22, and my wife is a lawyer by training. And I guess the only other thing that I always like to talk about myself is my love for sport. So I am a reasonably avid, some say crazy sports person. I play too many sports for my own good, and I'm a runner of sorts. So that's me in a few minutes.
I have already a lot of questions from the mini introductions that you shared from across your lifespan. So Alpesh, the way we start these podcasts is to really go back to the back and start from where were you born? What was your childhood like? What were your parents doing? So on and so forth. So let's really go back and shift the time horizon to your childhood and understand what was growing up in India for you was like.
Sure. So I was born in a village called Dhanduka, which is sort of 100 kilometers southwest of Ahmedabad. So it's on the highway between Ahmedabad and Bhavnagar. Both my parents, my mother and my father, did their schooling in Dhanduka, moved to Ahmedabad. So I was born in Dhanduka, and this goes back For most of you listening, will be before you were born. So this was 1970. Spent a lot of my early days between Ahmedabad and Bangalore. So I did my schooling half and half in Bangalore and Ahmedabad because my dad liked to move around. He was a mechanical engineer by training, and he was the general manager, as they called it, which now is, I guess, effectively a COO or a CEO of businesses, but he was the general manager of a few factories, and he moved around a bit. So he did his early work period in between Pune, Bombay, Ahmedabad, Bangalore, and back to Ahmedabad. By the time I came in, it was more Ahmedabad, Bangalore, Ahmedabad. So I spent a lot of my early days in Ahmedabad and Bangalore. And then I guess I finished both my schooling, graduation, and post graduation all within sort of 3 kilometers of my house in Ahmedabad. While I was growing up, I had the fortune of having, besides the hot weather in Ahmedabad, a lot of good friends. My sister, I had only one sibling, about 3.5, 4 years older than me. And yeah, so I guess we went to the same school, we went to the same college. So it was a blast. We had a lot of fun. And well, that's sort of the early days.
Very interesting. So, your sister is elder to you, right?
Correct.
Typically, elder siblings tend to leave a very important impression on our careers, on the value system. So, would you be comfortable sharing about your dynamics with your sister? How did she mold you in the current shape of format you are in?
If there are younger siblings and you have an older sister, you know that you always have two mothers and not one. So yes, I had mom who was obviously taking a lot of care. But then my sister also ended up being at least a half mother. Like many other younger brothers, you always end up looking up to your sister. Hence, I followed in her footsteps. So like I said, I went to the same school. She did her computer engineering. I went to the same college to do my computer engineering. And so yeah, it was because of her that I got pulled up a lot in school, because my teachers would tell me that for example, I would go to the library to pick up a book because I started reading a lot earlier because of my sister. Uh, I don't know whether it was I was trying to be her or whether I was just trying to be cool, but I ended up doing a lot of things much faster than I would typically have done. So I remember in the second standard grade, I would go to the library and ask for Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew, and my librarian said, "Why are you not taking books for yourself? Why are you taking it for your sister?" And I said, "I'm not taking it for her. I read." So you would end up having some of those discussions. So I would say she influenced everything from what I read to what I studied. So yeah, it was I don't know whether it was good or bad, but that's what it was. And like I said, my son is younger, so he's actually having the same problems. He's trying to break out of the shadow, and yeah, I guess it's always the case. So
I would still say really fortunate to have two mothers in our
I
world.
agree completely. I don't complain about that at all.
Perfect. So you were born in a village which is near Ahmedabad. You went to IIM Ahmedabad. Can we understand that journey? What was going in your mind? Did growing up in near Ahmedabad motivated you कि यार यहीं जाना है and I want to study here? What was that journey like?
I guess nothing like that. I don't have a cool story like that. In fact, the exact opposite. I was doing my computer engineering, and all the way until then, I thought I was very good at programming. And without being immodest, I was. And hence, I thought that I was going to be a good techie geek for the rest of my life. As a result, if I go back to my final year of engineering in 93, I did not even appear for the CAT entrance exams because I thought I was going to be programming. As it turned out, I had a bunch of friends. I always had this, thanks to my sister, my friends were always older than me. So it helped a lot because for example, even in sport, when you're 16 and you're playing with a 19-year-old, or when you're 12 and you're playing with a 15-year-old, you better be good. Otherwise, you don't get to do anything, right? And I had a lot of friends. 6 of us used to play badminton literally every night after dinner. And 4 would be playing doubles, 2 would be sitting out. And like I said, I was the youngest of the lot. They would all tell me, "Alpesh, you should go to the IIM." And I would look at them and say, "No, I'm a software guy. I'm a techie guy. I'm actually going to be programming." I don't know. What happened was, in the final year, we had this concept where you had to actually do an internship in a organization where one day a week you were supposed to be working there. I had the good opportunity of there were 3 different people, 2 of us from one college and a third person from a different college. We formed a team, and we were actually we got this opportunity to do our internship at ISRO. So Ahmedabad has a pretty large space research organization. So we were there, and luckily they had the best computers money could buy. So we were working on, really good, interesting stuff. I enjoyed it. As a result, we would bunk a couple of days of college. We would not only do Mondays, we would do Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. We would work Saturday, Sunday. So we were literally like full-time employees there. I did that for a year and I realized that's outstanding. I love it. But it's a hobby and I can't do it for a lifetime. And hence, in current jargon, I took a gap year. So I had finished in May, June. I took the entrance exams in December and I joined the next June. So I had a year in between, but that's what happened. So that's how IIM happened, because I said I don't want to program and I did not know anything else. So I said, what's the way out? And everybody said, MBA kar lo. So as they said, lage haath MBA kar liya. And I just literally went from my engineering to my MBA with a few months in between. It was not, I would say, a pre-planned choice or something of that sort.
But they say that a lot of good decisions come out of serendipitous moments in life.
Absolutely.
It seems like that must have been the case. So with that, we'll maybe move towards your consulting career. And you have said that you are a consultant by career choice, and you have done this for 28 years.
Yeah.
Throughout your life. On the contrary, our generation wants to experiment it all. I am a classic example or an output of doing public policy, doing BCG, starting a venture. The age bracket of people who are going to be watching this will be in the age bracket of 19 till 35.
Right.
So what made you join BCG as a consultant and then stick with it for so long?
So I guess you actually used the word I had. For me, joining BCG, again, like a lot of things in my life, they were not planned. It was serendipity. BCG 96, when I graduated from IIM Ahmedabad, was the first year the BCG came to campus or was coming to campus. And nobody knew what it was. This was the time when the internet was just about taking off, because, all of the people, as you said, who are listening to it now would find it strange, but the internet actually, for private individuals, only went live in 92. So 96 was really still very early days. I did not know much about it, so I reached out to friends in the US, and this was the old snail mail or calls, right? Friends in the US who had gone after my engineering to the US to say, have you heard of this firm? And they would say, we have, but, and so on and so forth, right? So I started interviewing on campus. I ended up not being sure of what I wanted to do. I had the good fortune of actually getting through a couple of the consulting firms and a couple of the investment banks. And then as it turned out, there was one individual who I actually had a lot of respect for, and I asked him, which was one of our professors called Korwa, Ashok Korwa. So I went and asked him saying, I have these choices, how should I evaluate? And he tells me, Alpesh, you are a consulting kind of a guy, whatever that meant. He said, go ahead, you will enjoy consulting. And, as they say, one thing led to another, I got into consulting. When I got into consulting, I had actually made up my mind, or I had not made up my mind, but I had told myself that I would do this for 4 years. Don't ask me why. And I said, after 4 years, we'll find something different. And I guess the 4 years still haven't finished. So to be honest, I'm also not a very heart-driven person. I'm more a head-driven decision maker. And so I actually, every few years, I would look out and say, what do I want to do? And you could call it mechanical, but literally every second January, I would set aside a month and talk to every headhunter in town to say, what do you have to throw at me? But I would not do it right through the year because that's too distracting. So I would set aside a month and I would say, okay, Jan of 98, Jan of 2000, Jan of 2002. And I would throw stuff because I'm a big fan of the fact that I did not want to stay in a place because of, inertia, but I wanted to stay there because I still thought that was the best place for me. Right, with whatever criteria I had, whatever value, And so I guess that's what's happened. So, every few years I have checked sort of my desires, and I've looked at it, and I've still arrived at the decision that this is what I would like. I can at least tell you that I have not been short of variety. Depends on what variety people talk about. But yeah, it's consulting, but within that, the number of different companies I've worked with, what I've really enjoyed. And to your question, what has kept me there, right? It's an interesting one. Many years back, so many moons back, I started this thing which said my 10 years in consulting. And I did that more as a training, and exactly the question raising for the new people joining us. So we have a new hire orientation. So I was asked by the HR team to say, why don't it's been 10 years and people all wonder, how can you survive in consulting for 10 years? So why don't you talk about that? So I started that. It got to a few years, then I had to change my presentation to my first 10 years in consulting. It got to a stage where they said, but why are we wasting this internally? We should take you to campus. And so I started doing the same talks on campus. Now I guess it's too much, my first 25 years in consulting or whatever, but that forced me to think. And I asked myself a question. I used to have this people used to laugh at me, but a very stupid question. I would ask people saying, what do you want your epitaph to say? And the young folks would answer that. It took one smart Alec to look at me and say, this is my answer, Alpesh, but what's yours? And I had never thought of it. It forced me to think, and I think I've now answered that. I want my epitaph to say, he made a difference to me. And I want a lot of people to say it. And as I look back, that's exactly what drives my behavior. That is why I enjoy consulting. Because both internally within BCG as well as with clients, this is a great platform to actually, just help people along the way. And help sounds, it's not condescending, it's not help, but it's actually just to be there, to support them along their journeys and, help make them more successful. But that's what I enjoy. That's what gives me the kick. And hence 28 and counting.
Soon 30 years in consulting, so on and so forth. I have a lot of curiosity on the future of consulting given how rapidly generative AI is coming up, but we'll cover that soon. But still sticking to the BCG journey, Alpesh, were there any pivotal moments that really shaped you to become the CEO of BCG India, now lead the BCG Asia Pacific CEO advisory as well? I'm sure that it's a covetous position. A lot of people would want to be sitting where you are. So were there any pivotal moments? And I'm asking that question because maybe it could become a note in someone's diary that I need to also do these 3 things that landed Alpesh in that position.
I wouldn't say for that specifically, but I think in general, the pivotal moment or moments, the only ones I can think of are about the people who mentored me along the way, right? Just finding the right mentors. And mentorship is always a two-way street, right? So you have to want somebody to mentor you, and that somebody has to want to mentor you. Chemistry has to work. You have to trust the other person has to care for you. And I would say that has been the only thing that I look back and say, if that hadn't worked out, I would certainly not have been where I am, right? So I would say one is just, finding the right mentors. And I look back and I had, there are two who have really made a difference to my life. The second theme I would pick is just having support from your loved ones, right? In general, consulting is a pretty demanding profession. So are many others, not to say that the others aren't. And as you look at doing that, and then as you get into some of these roles, the roles are also quite demanding. And so I will just say what one of my early partners had told me, saying, marry well. Right? So you have to find the right partner, which also helps along the way. So if you ask me pivotal moments, I would say those were the two, the right mentors and the right partners. Obviously then the right friends and so on, but I would just say those two would be, if I had to just pick two, those were the two that really stand out.
Extremely beautifully said. On mentorship, I have a question. Has there been any mentorship advice that stayed with you and still resonates with you today?
Lots, and I guess, but that doesn't come only from mentors, that comes from a lot of other people as well. So let me share 2 or 3 things that really stand out. One specific from the 2 mentors that I was talking about, but one more. So let me start. So the first one, my first mentor when I really started told me to dream big. He said, don't sell yourself short. And it's very easy to when you're young and you don't know what you're capable of. Right? I think for everybody, and this applies to everybody listening into this, sky is the limit. The only limit is in your mind. And so I would say the first one is dream big. The second one, which I would say applies to again all of us, you should look at changing, as this person tells me, change your orbit, or look at changing your orbit every 3 to 4 years. Right? The minute you start becoming comfortable with what you're doing means you're already it's sort of past its expiry date, and you should be looking at what next you can do, right? And it's a version of the dream big, but saying, keep changing your orbit every 3 or 4 years. And the last one, which I find very powerful, is, especially as you start leading people and leading teams, and you can start as early as 24 and 25 as well. But as soon as you start leading teams, right, whoever you're working with, it sounds very counterintuitive, but when your teams make mistakes, when they make small mistakes, wrap them on the knuckles. Okay, break their knuckles. When they make big mistakes, put your arm around them and show them that you're with them. It sounds very counterintuitive, but if you take the logic, it then becomes obvious. It says when somebody makes a small mistake, you have to break their knuckles to remind them of what the bar is, saying this is not the quality that whichever firm or whatever topic you're doing, I'm comfortable with. So you would knock their knuckles and say, this is not BCG quality, not done. Please pull up your socks. When they make a really big mistake, there's no point. They're anyway feeling so lousy. They know it, right? They're down in the dumps. And so there's no point at that point of time to slap them around. You better put your arm around them. Make sure that they know you're with them. Defend them, stand by them. So I would say those are things that really stand by. And the last one I would say is a very different thing, but it's got nothing to do with work, but it's a life lesson that I was given. And lesson is the wrong word, but yeah, advice that I was given. I was 35. I reached out to this person to say, give me advice on my career. The person looks at me and says, Alpesh, you know consulting better than I ever will. But this person was 65, 63. He said, I have lived life a lot more than you. Let me give you a few tips for life. So he said, tip number 1, make sure you have passions in life. Passions make a person interesting. When they talk about something, they come across as, very knowledgeable, because you will read everything about that topic. So whatever it is, it can be sport, music, dance, golf, whiskey, anything, right? But you should have passions in life. 2, obviously look after your health. Sounds intuitive. The third one was make sure you invest in your friends. Because when you're going up the corporate ladder, you're 25, 30, 35, and you're going up the corporate ladder, it's tempting. Friends reach out to you. You'll say, I don't have the time. I'm busy. I'm doing X. I'm doing Y. They invite you for their wedding and you don't make it. And he says, bad mistake. Because 20 years later, when you look back, the only thing you'll remember is the stupid thing you did together at some event, some wedding. And if you're not there today for them when they need you or when they want you around, they will find somebody else. They will not be around when you need them. And he says, without friends, life is not worth living. Right? So I would say those are the kinds of, I've got very different advice, as I said, from career to life. And I could go on forever. So I think all of us should be students for life, because life keeps teaching you new things. So.
Interesting. So Alpesh, on the first advice by a mentor on dreaming big, I think in the world of internet, and I genuinely believe that internet is a great equalizer. There are people who are failing UPSC and still reaching Cannes Film Festival, where celebrities such as Aishwarya Rai have reached. That means that our generation, in fact, the next generation, is kind of getting that feeling that we can dream big. But then comes the reality of challenges or falling on the rock bottom. I think I have learned a great deal more from falling at the rock bottom than by achieving anything. Kind of built a character in me. Would you be comfortable sharing about your challenges? How did you overcome them? And most importantly, if any lessons came out to you from them?
I think the point that you made, right? You learn more from challenges. You just have, it's very painful going through a challenging situation, but when you come out on the other side, you're actually stronger. So there are enough of these examples where, for example, the Australian Commandos application form says, share your biggest failures. Right? And the failure can't be, I'm a perfectionist. That's not a challenge. Right? It's a true failure. The failure can't be, I did not top my school or I did not top my exam. That's not a failure. Right? A failure is a big failure. Because, as you said, their logic is that if you haven't seen failure, you don't know how to come out of it. Right? You don't know how to get out of it. And there are enough of these examples which come out there. So let me divide the challenges into 2 parts, right? One is a personal set of challenges which I have faced. And then there's also as I was, as you look at it from a career perspective within a BCG, what comes out. But I started my consulting career with a company called Booz Allen and Hamilton. I was there 96 to 2000. The dot-com boom happened in 2000. The bust was imminent. At that point of time, because of the boom, Booz decided that they could not afford to continue in India because they were losing a lot of people in the US. So they actually took the call to shut Asia mid 2000, early 2000, Jan 2000, barring, I think, China and Japan. They shut everything else down. And the logic was very simple. The rest of Asia was growing very fast. So they needed to send more expats, which they didn't have because the rest of the world was hurting. So they said, we are better off taking these. For example, we were 29 of us in India. They said, we're better off taking this team to the US and UK. At least at that point of time, and now, as you said, the younger ones are a lot more comfortable. This is 2000, early 2000, Jan of 2000. My firm had shut down. I was all of 29. And I had a lot of people, and you could feel the sympathy from a lot of friends and family saying, oh, poor you. And I didn't feel that poor, honestly, albeit. But it just felt suddenly like, I had made a mistake. I had done something wrong. And I said, I haven't done anything. The firm shut down. It's okay. I'll find something else to do. But it actually felt, the world did not see it that way, right? So the world looked at you and said, poor you, you're out of a job. And so that was one, right? And it feels very strange, but I was feeling none of those emotions. I was not feeling bad. I was not feeling stressed. And people said, why aren't you feeling stressed? They're surprised that I wasn't, right? So I think that was something that more just how do you deal with, quote unquote, the society, right? So that was a very interesting challenge. And then, I guess the one takeaway from that was sort of self-belief. And like I said, I look at the younger ones now and I'm amazed at the confidence that people have, right? So I would say that was one simple thing that really changed. Two, you ended up having a lot of, as I told you, I'm a sports person, and so I pride myself on being reasonably fit. When I've had injuries is when I've actually had the most self-doubt, saying, will I come back from these injuries, right? So I go to 2018. I like running. So the favorite events are the 400 and the 800 meters. I run the Masters circuit. I was running in the nationals, and I actually literally, with the last 20-30 meters to go, I felt my right foot. I felt a twang on my right foot. Basically, my Achilles heel snapped. I mean, it didn't break, luckily. It was strained. I couldn't run. I had to stop running. To cut a long story short, my foot was in a cast. I went to a doctor. He put it in a cast, and he said, if you ever want to run again properly, foot in a cast and you're not running for 6 months. So I did not run for 6 months, but there was still this gnawing doubt at the back of my mind saying, can I ever get back? The good news was the next year, I went back and ran the nationals again within 6 months, and I did I was a second faster. So at least I knew I was as good as I used to be. I could not be better. So I think those are the kind of challenge that really test your self-belief. They really test you on that one, right? If I look at the professional side of it in terms of challenges, right, I think the biggest one that I wrestled with was, I was leading BCG India and COVID happened. And I have to tell you, it was both the most challenging and also the most humbling experience. Because you suddenly realize that you could be as smart as you thought you were. You could be as well connected as you thought you were. You could be as gifted as whatever. You could have as much money as you wanted. But you could not do everything that you wanted. You could not achieve everything that you wanted. There were people in the office who needed hospital beds, and we could not manage to get that. Right? And so I think that, if I'm being honest, was actually the most challenging time. It was also the most fulfilling time, but it was also the most humbling time. Because you suddenly looked at it brought you to ground reality to say you can think, you're very good, you can believe whatever you want about yourself and your capabilities. But there is something there are many things which are not in your control, and you can do nothing about it. So I think those are kind of challenges which I think really, they're very useful because, one, you learn a lot. Two, you learn a lot about yourself. It tells you what you will do in difficult situations, and they keep you grounded. So.
Very beautifully said. Alpesh, I'm thinking of an 18-year-old, especially from an IIT today. IITs for the longest period of time, ever since Jawaharlal Nehru set the foundations for it, have been the cradle of Indian education. Now, as per the news, at least, they are facing unemployment crisis. A lot of IITians are reaching out to my organization. I'm sure a lot in numbers to BCG as well. After hearing your significant challenges and how you persevered through them, I'm sure they can take a lot of learnings. But are there any quote unquote career advice to an 18 or a 19-year-old who really fought big in life, got into that IIT, and still is finding hard to get himself or herself a job?
I guess no silver bullet or no easy answers, right? What I said earlier, they have to fight through this. They have to recognize that when they get on the other side, they will actually look at what they learned out of this. Easy for me to say right now because I understand that there's a lot more, potentially a lot of stress, a lot of self-doubt, a lot of questions appearing in people's minds. I think the only thing I would say to them is hang in there. One, hang in there. Two, life is a marathon, right? So, literally, if they're 18, they have the next 40 years of life to do great things with their life, right? Maybe more, 45, 50. And sort of one setback, I would not even call it anything else, which says a setback is also compared to expectations, right? So I think it's a great realization and learning that, getting into IIT was a big high. Now the next step is, they will actually have to start all over again. And all I can do is wish them all the best because this is an off year. So they should look back. And I know at 18, it doesn't look that great. But if you go back to 2000, 2001, when there was a dot-com bust, when you go back to 2008, there have been these trying times when, people who've been coming out have, as the economy goes through tough times, you go back to COVID as well. There are people who've actually had to struggle without a job. So I guess just wishing them all the best and saying, hang in there and, put in your best. Big fan, while I'm not a religious person, I'm a big fan in Krishna's karm kiye jao. So, work on work on what is in your control. Do the best you can, and then, the fruits will follow.
Extremely beautifully said. And we will talk about the concept of hope soon. And with that, maybe we'll take a pivot and talk about consulting overall as an industry. So, Alpesh, there is no hush hush. Everyone knows about the McKinsey BCG rivalry. And at least when I was serving BCG as an organization, and I say that I bleed green, I think BCG was doing better than McKinsey in the office as per the statistics I knew. I hope so that it is continuing to do better than McKinsey in the office. But at a learning level from the CEO Diary podcast, are there any fundamental learnings that maybe an entrepreneur can take from this entire shifting of competitor scenarios?
I think entrepreneurs can take a lot of learning from multiple industries, so they don't have to look to consulting. I think if you look at consulting itself, right, or you look at across industries, there is always, in industries which are growing fast and which are being impacted by some trends or mega trends or some shifting trends, that is where there's always an opportunity for people to come in and disrupt market shares, right? So you can go industry by industry, right? You look at banking, you go, and I know again a lot of the younger ones would not even remember such a world, but I grew up in a world which didn't have an ICICI Bank, an HDFC Bank, or an Axis Bank. Right? They all came in the mid 90s. And today we all believe that they are the incumbents and the leaders, but they've actually disrupted. And so this is where either new entrants coming in, and what did they do? They started using technology. So one of the simplest things that they offered was that every branch is a bank and you can go to any branch. Before that happened, you had to only go to the one branch that you had your account in because they were not all connected. And so suddenly the people who adopted that connectivity first started benefiting a lot. Right? You look at, the more popular stories or the more well-known stories of how Kodak got stuck on, printed photographs and how Canon came in after that and, said digital is going to transform it and, they have a different story. So I think this is true across industries. You have to ride the wave as trends come in, whether it's technology, whether it is a customer behavior shift, whether it's a regulatory shift. There are multiple elements that can potentially change in different businesses. And I think both from a for somebody entering that segment first and then wanting to gain share, or to make sure that you stay relevant, it's actually very critical to track these changes and then sort of be on top of them. And these changes impact every industry. So I joke, but the obituary of consulting has been written many times over in the last two and a half decades, right? So in the 90s, the internet came in, people said, now why do I need a consultant? All the information is online. So yes, I guess before that, consultants' value proposition, the importance of information was very large in that. And suddenly that changed to say, okay, information is available, but the interpretation is not, right? So then you had to shift. Then along came the KPOs in the late 90s and the early 2000s, and people said, now I can get an industry report for 25, 30, $50,000. Why do I need consultants, right? Again, so you had to change, because yes, until then, just telling a client about a market, saying the market is X million dollars with 20 players, and this is the market share, and this is how it shifted, this is the channel mix, and this is the product mix, all of that seemed to be sort of very, very valuable, and suddenly the value of that completely diminished. But I guess as consultants, we did overcome that as well. And then along came these data analytics firms, and everybody said, now Palantir can give me everything. Why do I need consulting? So I guess at least three that I can talk of, and the fourth one is now with AI and Gen AI. It's out there, and I guess what that does is just means that what we offer as consultants has to change, right? The value proposition keeps evolving. The day we stop evolving is the beginning of the end, right? So I think, and that applies to every industry, that applies to every business. The day we believe that we know everything there is to know about that sector, we might as well write the last page, the last chapter of that industry, right? So I think that's what we all have to keep reminding ourselves.
Very interesting, and that makes me come towards the question on obituary of consulting and generative AI as well. So Alpesh, I very actively use ChatGPT, in fact the latest version, and I was intending to find a place anywhere on the world map, and I thought of, why not ask ChatGPT. I gave GPT 5 parameters, that I care about quality of life, I care about cheap vacation, so on and so forth. And I said, why don't you give me a list of nations and cities I can visit, and rank order also them for me based on the parameters. I was just shell shocked. Within, I think, fraction of seconds, that critical analysis also came out. And then I was just dumb shocked looking at it, that this level of critical analysis I was doing as a consultant maybe would take me to full day capacity. So maybe a little more specific question in terms of value proposition. Do we have running answer on the future of consulting, given that there is now critical reasoning also coming our way from ChatGPT and other open AI platforms?
The answer is yes and no. So I don't think it is ever going to be, do I have an answer which is going to stay even relevant next year? The answer is no, right? I guess the simple answer is, what you look at, right, is what is the interpretation of all of that. So there is, as I said, if I go back, there is data. You make sense out of it. People call it information. As you said, you start interpreting it, then that gives you critical assessment. What we are all doing, so we use ChatGPT as well, or whatever. We use OpenAI or LLMs as well, right? And I guess the question is, one of the things we've been doing right now is, how do you make sure that you use that and actually make your, if you call it that, your work more efficient? There is still, you still have to apply a lot of judgment to that. You have to make sure that it's accurate. The other thing we do is we also tell our clients, we ask them that whether they're comfortable with us using it. Right? So I think there is different ways and means. Exactly, for me, the way I see it is the same way as computers became a tool, analytics became a tool, Gen AI is going to be a tool for us, right? It is a tool to make decisions faster. It's a tool to make decisions better. It's a tool to make decisions more sustainable, long lasting. Now, the question could well be saying, well, if that happens, do we really need consulting? And time alone will tell. I think the answer is yes. And we'll, I don't think there is right now, there's any doubt in our minds that the answer is yes. But the way we see OpenAI evolving is a fascinating thing. In fact, we did a workshop for our clients about 15, 16 months back, last February. And in those 15 months, if I just look at the progress that has been made, it is mind-boggling. So I just think the pace at which things are evolving, I would like to believe we need consultants even more, right? Because change is something that we really value. As consultants, when things are changing, it actually makes it more difficult to assess, to predict, to think about it. So I would assume that the need for consultants will be even higher, not less.
With that, Alpesh, we'll move towards the last section of this pod, which is around work-life balance, defining success, hope, etc. So, work-life balance has become a hot topic. There are industry leaders who are advocating that India and young Indians should work 80 hours. At the same time, there was an extremely unfortunate scenario of a young consultant who lost his life. Of course, there is an investigation going on, but there were very few people who came from the industry and shared a view. And I'm very sure when a suicide happens, there are multiple factors, not easy to then pinpoint and then just say one. When a young professional is going to hear you, he or she is maybe clocking in 14 hours every day, maybe for a job that he likes, maybe for a job that she doesn't even like, but they need to feed their family, they need to still continue doing it. So, what would be your advice on how have you managed your work life till now? And what would you advise the next Indians or the next generation to maintain that work life balance?
I guess it's easy for me to say. And let me tell you, you'll figure out why, right? So I would say that when people talk about work life, I think people have to realize that what's more important is life, right? Work has to be a part of life. Work is not life. And so when people tell me they work 14 hours a day, 6 days a week, I actually find it unacceptable. Right? I don't think it makes any sense for any human being to do that. Whether it's 5 or 6 days is obviously depending on the industry and depending on the companies that you're in. So I'm not even getting down that path. But in all honesty, I think that people have to find their own pace and their own sustainable life. For me, the rough estimate is anywhere between 55 and 60 hours a week is actually a good life. And you can work a life around that. And I go back at the beginning, I was telling you that you have to have passions in life. I can tell you that at least now, coming to myself, and I'll come back to the, as inputs for the others. There was a period of time for a month when I did, I think, 75, 80 hours a week. And I told my wife to clock it, and I told her that if I cross 70 hours more than 4 weeks out of the next 5, I quit. Because I honestly believe that life is more than just work. If I look at what that means, right? I told you I'm a sports freak. On an average, I spend anywhere between 5 and 8 hours a week playing something or working out. Okay, every week. And I did that when I was 25. It's gotten better. I used to do 3 or 4 hours when I was 25. Now, actually, as you get older, you realize that you need to do more just to stay in the same place. I do 5 or 6 hours now. So I've doubled that. But even when I was 25, and a lot of people say it's easy to say when you become senior, but when you're younger, is it possible, right? I have a very simple philosophy which says if it is in your top 5 things to do, you will get it done. But if your health is not in your top 5, you will never look after yourself. It's fine. But first, make time for yourself, right? You have to. And it doesn't matter, no job is that important. So that's one. How do you do that is an important part, right? So obviously, let me keep the bosses out for a minute, because you also have to have a boss who's willing to let you do that. And we'll come to that in a minute. But it's how that has worked for me. I can tell you 3 things, right? Prioritize, prioritize, prioritize. Even now, if somebody told me, Alpesh, I want you to free up a day a week of your life, the bottom 20% of whatever we're doing is not adding much value. We can take it out. It's important to identify the 20 and not take out the top 20. But, prioritize like nobody's business. You can chop the tail. The second one, especially as you get to being even sort of into middle management, build a strong team. And there was this very famous cliched statement saying, make sure the team is stronger than you. Have the confidence to hire people better than you. Because then you can get to my third point, which is delegate, delegate, delegate. So anything that your team can do, you should not be doing. Right? So you combine the 3, if you can prioritize well, you actually have a strong team and you delegate, then hopefully you start not having to work the 14 hours a week, right? So the second part of that is you also have to find your own pace. And I don't think there's one magic answer, because for some people, it's akin to running on the treadmill. For some people, running on the treadmill at 8 kilometers per hour is easy. But the minute you make it 9, they start struggling. For others, running at 9 is easy and 10 is difficult. For others, 10 is easy. And so you can go on. For some people, running at 15 might also be easy. But, for example, I run and I can run at 12. The minute you make it 13, I can do half an hour or an hour and then I'm tired. The minute you do 14, I'll do 15 minutes. If you did 15, I'll just say, thank you, I'm stopping, right? And so that's the trick. People have to know and get comfortable with what their pace is. And then also find the balance which says, at that pace, so fine, I'm not going to be the fastest person around. It's okay. Get comfortable with that. The minute you start comparing to the person on the machine next to you who's doing 15, and you say, I want to run at that, that's not a good idea. So I guess now it gets very philosophical, which is saying, figure out what you want to do, the pace at which you want to run it, and not by comparing to others. Comparing to peers, comparing to friends, comparing to relatives is the biggest mistake you can make. Right? That sets you up to say, I have to do this job and I have to do 14 hours because I want to make more money, because I want to, go out and tell the world I succeeded. That's not a good idea. And I know, like I said, it gets very philosophical, so it's very difficult to sort of live with that. But like I said, prioritize well, build a strong team, delegate well. But then before all of that, decide what you want to do. And not because the others want to do it, but because you want to do it.
I really like that sentence, don't be the fastest. And in fact, I was about to ask a little philosophical question, which was about success, and you kind of touched upon it already. Alpesh, imagine that Alpesh gets to become 95, still running on that treadmill. And Alpesh has to define success for himself, whether he had a successful life professionally and personally. So what will be your definition of success?
It goes back to the one sentence I told you, right? I want a lot of people to say he made a difference to me. For me, that's success. And the more people who say it, the better I will feel. Right? They will obviously never tell me on my face. And hence, as they say, I keep doing stuff because I think I'm doing that. And yes, and within that, as you know, when friends and family say that, even more, I will be even happier. So I think success for me is being at peace and being happy with what I've achieved and done. And what I've achieved and done, for me, the metric is, did I make a difference to a lot of people?
With that, we'll move to being the student of life that you said you are. I always ask all the guests on the pod to share any list of books, any list of podcasts, or any other source of information through they learn. For example, I still read BCG Henderson Institute every weekly. It's just my ritual to just learn about the business knowledge. So is there any list of your top favorite books that you would want to recommend to the audience?
No specific books, but I'll tell you what I would recommend to the audience. Even today, and I read a book, I guess it's become bad. I used to read a book a week. It's come down to a book a fortnight. Read a book regularly, whatever sort of fits within your rhythm. Read and read anything and everything, because the best part of life, for me, education is just broadening your horizons. The more, and you can either talk to people, you can read, you can listen. In fact, it's quite interesting. Just yesterday evening, I was at a friend's place, small group of 20-25 of us. One of them has spent the last 5 years of his life just reading the Ramayana by Valmiki. And the whole conversation was, what do you learn from the Ramayana? Okay. And it sounds very strange. And like I said, hence, I believe you learn from anything and everything. So read whatever is your passion, whether it's fiction, you can learn from fiction as well. Whether it's history, read biographies. So I don't have a specific book. I read biographies, I read history. I'm a big student of history. I read fiction. I like pulp fiction. So I'm saying, all I would say is no specific one book or one podcast, but just read.
Any recommendations on history? I'm a history buff myself, so I'm asking for myself.
I will send you, I have read too many books. I'm now very confused. So I will send you a lot of books. Depends on what history as well. So Indian history, world history. So there is a lot to be said about that. So I would just say, read a lot. And the reason I say that is that curiosity and sort of willingness and openness to learn is the best virtue that you can have. If you're curious and if you're willing to just challenge your own, I laugh, but many things I thought were, I had all these, I used to pass judgment and say, this is right, this is wrong. 20 years back, and now look back and I just realized I was wrong. None of those things were wrong. I was wrong in even passing a judgment on that, because There are so many variables that determine so many actions that people do in history, in life. So the more you sort of expand your horizons, and the only way to do that is absorb, soak in stuff. So read and talk to a lot of people.
Beautifully said. I look forward to getting that list of book from you as well. With that, Alpesh, we're at the end of the pod, and this is going to be my favorite question because it's going to help the audience as well. If we could go back in time, so time travel, and we could meet the young 25-year-old Alpesh, and maybe I think you were working at Booz Hamilton back then.
Yeah.
What is that one piece of advice that you would like to give? Maybe it's an equivalent of what you would tell your daughter and son today.
One is too little. I'll go with two, but fine. Let me start with one. So I would say the first one that I would give myself would be, or give anybody, right? But specifically myself, is have patience. Life is a marathon, right? And I look back, and I was also in a hurry to do a lot of things, and I wanted to do everything yesterday. I was trying to pack a lot of things into life, but that's one. And the second one, which I think is, like I said, as you get older, you get philosophical. So the second one is smile more, laugh more, and don't take life too seriously. Life is a lot more fun when you don't take it too seriously.
Very beautiful. With that, we are going to wrap up this CEO Diary pod. Alpesh, here's to taking life less seriously and laughing more.